What is up, y'all? Will here with Schedule Fly, and this is another episode of the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast brought to you by us here at Schedule Fly. Simple web-based restaurant employee scheduling, legendary customer service, and at this time, a low price point. We have not raised our prices since 2007. So if you are on pencil and paper or Excel and you want to resolve your scheduling headaches, head on over to schedulefly.com, 30-day free trial. If you're on another provider and the prices keep going up because they're owned by venture capital or private equity, come on over and give us a shot, schedulefly.com. And my personal cell phone is right there on the website on 3 pages, so call me anytime. Thank you very much, Justin, for taking the time to join today from out there in Denver. How about just introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. My name is Justin Cucci, originally from, New York, and now living in beautiful Denver, Colorado.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, I've got a lot of things I want to ask you about. I read your background in the summary, and I know the answer to this in general, but I'm going to ask this because it's the one question I ask everybody on this podcast is, how and when did you first get started in hospitality?
Yeah, for me, that happened at an early age. My grandparents owned a very well-known restaurant in Manhattan called the Waverly Inn, and they owned it for going on almost 38 years. And so my parents both worked there we lived in Greenwich Village. So honestly, from the time I was, learned to walk, it was in that restaurant. From the time I learned to talk, and then eventually I just fell in love with just being there. It was a familiar restaurant. My grandparents were very hospitality based. They were front of the house people. They didn't know anything about the back of the house. And so I was lucky enough to just grow up in that culture until which time I was old enough to just start picking up some summer work there, which was maybe 11, 12, 13. And then from that point, sort of making salads for the waitresses in the back to being a busboy, to being a server, bartender, so on and so forth. I went on to just run that for a couple of years. So I just lived that life for a good, my most formative years, like 13 to 23.
And you, did I read correctly? You dropped out of college to get dialed in. Like
Yeah,
you probably went to college thinking like, okay, I grew up in this, but I'm going to go off and learn something new and do something. But it just kept drawing you back. Is that it?
it's exactly it. My grandparents were adamant that they did not want me in the family business because they thought I could be a, doctor, lawyer, whatever. So I went to college for computer science. This is back in the 80s. And I was learning to write code. And after one semester, I realized this is a really pointless endeavor. I don't see computers around me. I don't get it. I don't think this is going to be the future of the world. So why am I bother learning to write code? Because it was very boring to write code. There was no laptops. There was no cell phones. So I did drop out. And then I managed to convince my way to let me into the restaurant. And I was definitely drawn back there every day.
Aren't you glad that you didn't go off to do something
Yes.
like that now, man? I'm happy that you did.
Yeah, so happy I didn't. I followed, one was sort of following my intellect, one was following my passion. And the restaurant business is definitely about following your passion. And I did, and I'm definitely glad I did.
It is about following your passion. And boy, I tell you what, man, you got to be passionate about it to make it in this world of hospitality, because as amazing as it is and as rewarding as it can be, it is challenging as heck. It's probably more challenging than ever right now, or at least than it has been in a long time. But those of you that have this DNA of like wanting to provide hospitality, which is just basically wanting to make people feel welcome in your home, I think that you kind of have to have it in you. And I think if you have it in you, that's what can help sustain you to be successful in this industry. I think if you don't, it's really hard to be successful. There's a lot of people that look at restaurants, they're like, that looks cool. I want to open a restaurant. I'm good at cooking or whatever. But man, that's like this little piece that's like really cool. But like, if you're not down with like, hey man, the chef or the dishwasher just quit at 3 a.m. and I got to go wash dishes or mop floors, like, because that kind of all comes along with it, doesn't it?
It does. Excuse me. The hospitality part is obviously so key, but it's really, in a way, a small part of it, because you have to be able to not only, do it, preach it, you got to talk about it. You got to let others know what it looks like, because when you have a staff of 30, 100, we have almost 300 and something employees. we have to be not only good at understanding what hospitality is, but actually better at talking about it and affecting others so that they can bring their hospitality to the guest. It's also something that I think, some people are really good at making you feel welcome at home. And that's a form of hospitality. But for us, like, hospitality doesn't start when the shift opens. It's from the minute we walk in the doors to each other. And if we're not doing it to each other, how are we ever going to be doing it on the guest to the level we want to? So it really has to be an all-encompassing philosophy. But it's also, like I said, just a small part of being successful, because you have so much that you have to articulate. You have to show what it looks like. And most of all, you have to make sure the guest is feeling it, because sometimes people think hospitality is this, and I think they get mixed up between service and hospitality. And sometimes, I think myself included, most guests are very forgiving. If a server doesn't know anything about the menu, forgot part of your order, and didn't know the drink specials for the night. But if they delivered an authentic, warm hospitality experience, that is way more impactful than the server who knows everything by the book, but isn't warm, isn't inviting, etc.
Yeah, it's like you can train somebody to serve, but you can't train them to love people. If you don't have that in you, that becomes really challenging, I think, especially, maybe more so than ever. I mean, it's we're surrounded by technology now, like just everywhere. We're on screens constantly. And so, but as humans, we always crave connectedness and intention and warmth and eye to eye and
Yep.
just somebody being present. And the more that I feel like, I mean, I might be wrong, but it just seems to me like the more we're inundated with tech in every aspect of our lives, when we go to dine, to celebrate, to mourn or whatever with our friends and our family, we just want like somebody to be there, to be present, to make us feel warm and welcome, like really genuinely.
I think it's so true. I think the more our lives are affected by tech, the more those few moments of hospitality, whether it's a restaurant, a hotel, whatever it is, you crave it even more to be authentic. And it's hard because we're using technology in the restaurants. We're having handheld screens. We're using, KDS screens in the kitchen. We're trying all this, tech to try and get better and more efficient with our labor, but we don't want to, lose our heartbeat and lose our soul, because at the end of the day, it's that authenticity that guests just know. They know when it's not there. They know when you're faking it, and keeping it real in that way is just so important to being successful.
Well, I want to ask you about something that I'm seeing more of this these days. I read about you have an ESOP there, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, because and I know I'm trying to think of the pizza place out there, and I'm drawing a blank right now. Chip Bear's place, Bojo's. Do you know Bojo's?
I don't.
They're in they started in Idaho Falls. They've got like 6 or 7 pizza locations. I was out there, I guess it's been about a year ago, to celebrate 50 years and kind of his retirement. He started an ESOP, and I was like,
Nice.
the first time I'd seen that, and I was recently with somebody in Tahoe. He's kind of doing that with his restaurant. So it's clearly something people are thinking more about, but you're on the cutting edge of that. It's not something you hear a lot of, but I want to talk about what it is and why you're doing it and why you think it's important.
Okay, it's a little lengthy, but I will try and give the shorter version. So an ESOP is essentially a way to give employees ownership. And you can be a 10% ESOP, a 50%. We're 100% ESOP. And what that means is our employees essentially own 100% of the restaurant. Now, that doesn't happen overnight. It's basically a sale. But the nice thing about an ESOP is nobody is bringing any money to the table. The way it works is the restaurant or the business gets a loan on behalf of the employees, although they never signed for it. A trustee is the one who sits on the other side of the table. And essentially a loan is taken out to pay off the owner. And in the meantime, it gives the opportunity to the staff to earn shares. And as the debt is paid down, just like your house, the value becomes more. But also as the market conditions change, right? If the market is going up, then also the restaurant is worth more. So the idea is by the time this is paid off to the owner, which is myself, then the staff then will have not only an asset that has been fully paid off, but it's hopefully gone up in value. And the other way an ESOP works is by getting all of this buy-in. If I can have 300 employees felt bought in with more tenure, with more care, with more awareness about our P&L, the theory is we'll be a better business, we'll be a stronger business. So by having an ESOP, it feeds itself. it makes itself a stronger business, a more profitable business, because every dollar of profit is shared amongst the employees. There is no owner getting any profit now. So if we make a boatload of money one year, that all trickles down to the employees. And so basically it's ESOPs are a very small part of the small business world. Out of 36 million small businesses, I think it's less than 1%. And out of that, I think restaurants are less than 1%. So it's a very up and coming market. And I was at a point where we had this, sort of mediocre rise to success that just happened. We opened restaurant after restaurant. Each one was more successful than the rest. So by the time I got to what is my succession plan? And the options at the time were, well, you can sell the restaurant group to somebody, you can split them up and sell them, you can try and get a, investor. None of those felt like who we were or who I wanted to be. I was so indebted in my staff and my leaders that really without them, it would have been a much different story. There's no doubt about it. So I felt really indebted to the employees that I wanted to find a way that they could share in the growth and the worth and the wealth of the business. And that's done through an ESOP.
So how does this work, Justin? Let's say, I'm going to make some assumptions here. So if I'm a GM there that's been with you for 15 years or whatever, I'm assuming I'm going to have more of a stake in this than a server who's been there for 15 months. How does that all work? And how is it allocated over time as you have tenure there? Do you vest, or could you dive into a little bit of that?
Yeah, great questions. The way it's set up, I think, is super intelligent. It basically, the shares are given out based on your W-2. So the idea is if you're a GM, you're making more than a floor manager, making more than a server. So the GM is going to get the, bigger portion of shares, manager smaller, and server therefore. So basically, shares are given out based on your W-2. And then there is a vesting schedule. And basically, it takes 1 year to begin vesting, and then it vests 20% over the next 5 years. So for a manager who's been there 15 years, they are already 100% invested. By the virtue of their W-2, they probably have a bigger portion of shares. And that server who's only 15 months only has 3 months that they've begun their journey into the first 20%, because they're only in, we have a 1 year waiting period, then you start vesting. So there's a lot of mechanisms built in so that it honors the people who are probably carrying the heaviest weight, putting in the most time, and are playing the long game. And then the people who are in and out of the restaurant, which is always going to be part of this industry, they often, don't see much of a return. I tell my employees, like any small business, especially a restaurant, this is the long game. I don't know anybody in the restaurant in 3 years has cashed in and said, I'm done. I nailed it. This isn't tech. This isn't Bitcoin. So I tell anybody who's in in our sort of ESOP, it's the long game. If you're not here for less than 5 years, don't expect much to get out of it. But if you are here for 5 years or more, I think there's a way for it to be very lucrative.
Got it. Yep. That makes sense. And then it's profit sharing. So if you own X percent, you get X percent of the profits every year. And then
the real event is once we decide to sell, right? Let's just say in 10 years, all the debt is paid off. So we have zero debt on the company, and we decide to sell it. Let's just say for $10 million. That $10 million is the employee's money. The owner at that time is done. So not only are the yearly P&Ls eventually trickle down to a sort of form of profit share, but at the end of the day, when there's an event that happens, that's when the employees might really cash in. And that's when you hear people like the crane driver made $250,000 when one of the ESOPs here sold for one of the beer companies, just the crane driver. So it could be impactful. It depends on the market conditions, which right now are not great. It depends on, the strength of the brand. We're already in Denver 15 years. So we have a strong foundation that we are, continuing to add to.
Okay. Makes a ton of sense. So they're playing now. Is the owner, that loan pays you up front, or do you earn that out over time as the debt pays down, or how does that work?
That's the brilliant part about an ESOP is it keeps the owner vested because I am paid off over time.
Yeah.
So that, as opposed to me like an owner being paid in, let's say a sale, who's like, peace out, good luck, guys. This is keeping the owner best interest involved, because if the restaurant doesn't work and isn't successful, then I wouldn't get paid the note from the restaurant.
Got it. Makes a ton. When did you implement this?
So we started 3 years ago. We're just at our third year of ESOP-ness.
Got it. Okay. Super cool. All right. And how long did you say you've been in Denver for 15 years?
15 years now. Yeah. We opened Root Down, which is our first restaurant 15 years ago.
Why did you go to Denver?
So I had loved New York, but when my grandparents sold that restaurant, I had really tried to find a group of people, including myself, to buy it. I was putting ads in the Village Voice. I was talking to investors. I loved that restaurant. I grew up there. That was my like home. And so when they did sell it to somebody else, I wasn't able to come up with the money. I left New York and I actually moved to Key West. My family, my sister and my mother were there, and I opened 2 restaurants there. I didn't know that was going to be my journey, but I ended up opening 2 restaurants there and spent about a decade there. So by the time I was done with that decade, I had really fell in love with Denver. I had been here a little bit prior to moving here. And I made a beeline the day the restaurant sold, literally the next day, because I sold my restaurant to a private sale in Key West. The next day I was on a plane over here, got an apartment, and just started looking for my next endeavor, and was just driving around block after block after block, looking for some quiet little corner, sort of secret place that nobody had found yet. And I found these gas station that was abandoned. And it was on this really funky corner, which was no great corner, no great shakes. And I decided to just put all my marbles, literally put everything I had gotten from the sale onto opening up my first restaurant here, which was called Root Down.
Got it. Okay. All right. So from Key West to Denver, what
Yeah.
was Key West? I mean, you were there 10 years. You obviously enjoyed your time there, I would imagine, but you were ready to get out. Was it too hot, or is it just what's the story down there?
Man, just being a New Yorker, the heat and the humidity there were nonstop. Some people love that. Don't get me wrong. That's some people's paradise. My paradise is the weather in Denver, having 4 seasons, lots of sunshine, mostly really beautiful because our winters are not really brutal. So I feel like after living in New York for almost 30 years, I was overwhelmed living in that city. And when I moved to Key West for 10 years, I was underwhelmed. So I really wanted to come to a place where I was whelmed, neither under nor over. And Denver whelmed me in all the right ways. And I was at a point in my life when I wanted to be connected to, I had lived on 2 islands, frankly, Manhattan and Key West. So I really had no connection to bigger than, it was always just the island, this little sort of piece of, real estate that everything gets dropped on and then it disappears, and you have to drive so far to get to places. So I love that Denver was just really connected to the mountains, and it was the right place, right time for me.
Got it. Okay. Well, so tell me about, this was a couple things I want to ask you. I want to ask you sort of macro, what's going on, and then also more micro. I keep up with a lot of folks out there in Denver. Do you know Dave Query?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Consider him a friend.
Okay. Dave's I've gotten to know him
Great.
well. I stay with he and Dana when I go out there, so I keep up with him a lot. He's been pretty hot about some stuff in Denver.
Yep.
But let's just start macro, because it seems like it's a bit of a challenging environment right now, just in general. Like everything y'all buy has gone up. Consumers are starting to tighten their belts. So are you seeing that out there?
Yeah, I think me and Dave sometimes get on the phone and just, get to vent to each other a little bit. It is exactly that. Look, the inflation has taken its toll. Although it's stopped, prices haven't rolled backwards. So right away we have accelerated pricing on goods. Then for us in Denver, and this is a good thing and a difficult thing, our minimum wage is $19 an hour. Now, I have to caveat that with, at Edible Beats, because we're an ESOP, we decided to do a whole house tip pool. So we have our dishwashers, our line cooks, our hosts, everybody shares in the tip pool. And because of that, we pay people the minimum wage, not the tipped minimum wage, which is $3 less. Either way, $19 or $16 an hour for a server is a lot of money for servers. That is one of the highest in the country. So any restaurant in Denver is experiencing a really difficult time managing the minimum wage, whether it's tipped or untipped. And that's something what a lot of people have gotten, a little hot about. And look, I want people to have a living wage. I want people to be able to afford to live in Denver. But I think what happened was they set these minimum wage increases prior to COVID, and they were going at a pretty good clip. But I think it's something in the last 10 years, it has gone up over 300%. And that's just unsustainable unless, of course, people are willing to pay almost 300% more for a Coors Light or a burger or a salad. And that hasn't happened. So at the same time, people are pinching their their money in a way. So like they want to pay even less for what they paid for. So we have to raise prices like on a tightrope. Some days it's one or two things. Some days it's three or four. Some days it's none. Some months it's none because it's just a tightrope walk to balance all those things. So yeah, there's a lot of conditions. I think I read the other day, 25% of restaurants in Denver have closed in the last 2 years. Think of an industry where 1/4 of all of the businesses in one sector have closed in 2 years. That's a problem. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that's a problem.
That is a big challenge. 25%?
25%. It's crazy. I think it was the Westward who printed that.
What is happening to all those spaces? Oh,
Well, there's, as always, restaurateurs are dreamers. They follow their passion. So some of those spaces are getting re-rented. But
yeah.
I would say I've never seen more empty restaurant locations than I have right now. I've always seen a couple here and there, but in Highlands alone, there's probably 8 spaces that are just sitting vacant right now, waiting for the next person to come along. And, restaurants have been through so many trying times, but I've never seen it so localized. I've seen it across the country or, in the industry as a whole. And maybe this is happening in other places, but our labor issues are just, 40 to 50% is probably the successful restaurant's version of a successful labor model is 40 to 50%. And that's not sustainable. But that to me, like if we can hit in the mid 40s, I'm like, yes, we didn't lose a ton of money. We almost broke even at 45%. But making money right now is like off most restaurateurs, goals. It's just how do we get more efficient? How do we inspire our staff to do more with less? Which also was another thing that happened. We lost so much of our industry's best people during COVID, and a lot of them never came back. So if I was working with many of the people I worked with pre-COVID in this condition, I think we'd be much farther ahead. We just had so much talent, so much tenure, so much passion. But now we lost a lot of those people so that a lot of the people who have come into the industry are first timers. It's their second job. It's not their passion. It's just a way to like make it through a summer, make it through your school. And so it's just been challenging between all of those conditions.
Do y'all, I know, so you talked to Dave, like, do you have a good group of restaurant owners out there that y'all collaborate, share ideas, and try to figure out how to navigate through this collectively?
Yeah, I've never experienced such a sharing group of collaborators in terms of the restaurant owners. I living in New York and in Key West, I don't remember ever talking to about maybe one restaurant owner who I knew for years and years and years. But in Denver, that culture is alive and well. And I know probably 8 or 10, I would like to say, of the, most of the multi-unit independent restaurateurs in Denver. Anytime I have a question and vice versa, it's a text, it's a phone call, it's a Zoom, and there's lots of sharing of information and there's lots of rallying around how can we, as, the voice of maybe some of the most, cherished and tenured restaurants in the city, how can we make a change? So there's Dave is leading a whole bunch of great energy in talking to the mayor and asking, how can the city try and give back to some of these restaurants? That is the fabric and the lifeblood of some of our neighborhoods and communities. People love the restaurant scene in Denver because it's so diverse. We also employ, I don't know what the figure is, but we have so many jobs that we employ and we pay taxes. And I think the money, at least in my group, and I think Dave's and many others, the money stays here. We're not an out-of-town restaurant group. We're not a bunch of investors that have, New Hampshire LLCs. We are Denver restaurateurs with LLCs in Denver. The money stays here. So we just want the city to be aware that this is a vibrant group of financially, viable businesses that need some form of direction from them. Excuse me.
Yeah, no worries. You've had some, if I'm not mistaken, you've had some rise in crime in Denver as well?
100%. I think it was last year, and I wish I kept the spec, but at the time I read it, we were the top in not murders, but in non-murder violent crime, from muggings to sexual assaults to just regular assaults. Like we led the country for a short time. So crime has gone up as homelessness obviously has, as the drug epidemic continues to have its effects, as, people were out of work. And so these are all conditions that I think Denver needs to do a better job of fixing. And I know the mayor has talked about that there's been money earmarked for that. Especially we had a restaurant downtown that was in the heart of downtown called, and the restaurant was Ophelia's. It was a live music venue and restaurant. And we were in the downtown area. The change pre-COVID to post-COVID was like it went back 30 years. Didn't go back 5 years in time. It went to 30 years when that was a skid row, when there was, frequent stabbings and shootings. And it seemed like, and it wasn't every week, but it seemed like every week there was something that made Denver freaked out about going downtown. And it's like, I know other businesses were affected by it. We were. Our numbers went down immensely. Our numbers probably went down from doing, sometimes 180 to $100,000 a week to we had $20,000 weeks. So when your sales get cut by, 75%, you could be creative as hell, but it doesn't mean you have a solution if people are not willing to come down to your restaurant.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. God, that's tough. Well, it's like I find that the restaurant industry is as resilient and adaptive as probably any industry there is. And some thing, Justin, it's like people, I don't think people, you articulated this really well. Restaurants, particularly independent restaurants, not big chains where the money flows wherever, but independent restaurants, small restaurant groups like yours, Dave's, tons of them, great ones out there in Denver and Boulder and the Front Range there. The money stays there, and these communities, part of what attracts people there. Why do people want to move to Denver? Why do people want to move it? Well, you start rattling off like, why are people going to a place? And you're always going to find in the top 5 reasons, you got like climate, you got geography, and you got restaurants.
Yeah.
Like always, like name me a community that, or a town or a big city or a small town that people say that's a great place. Oh, well, why? And it's, you can't get through 2 or 3 of these things where you go, well, all these freaking awesome restaurants. So, but I think people started to realize it a little bit during COVID, and then because it was like, oh my gosh, I don't want my favorite place to close. And then now we're just back kind of doing stuff. And, but I look at restaurants somewhere in the same realm of almost like first responders in terms of being like really important to a community. And I'll tell you why. I don't say it lightly, but if I sit back and look at like what happened in Western North Carolina back in the fall with all the floods, or what happened in Los Angeles with the fires, you've got all your first responders, but who's also there giving time, money, feeding people, rallying people, raising money, giving food? It's restaurant owners. Always. Yeah. Anytime there's some disaster. And why is that? Well, it's because restaurant owners want to take care of people. That's what y'all do.
Yeah.
When bad things happen, who always shows up? Restaurant owners. What happened during COVID? Nobody can come in your place. Your business is shut down. You got all these rules and said, what do y'all do? We're going to figure out a way for people to come here and buy food from us and take care of people because they're closed in and shut off. And like, so that's kind of my little soapbox thing. I try to tell people about restaurants and how important they are. Like, don't underestimate the value. You don't want restaurants to be closing and then nothing opening in their place, because that will just degrade a community like really fast, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was very well said. And I couldn't agree more. We love to feed people and take care of people. And, in a way, there's healing through food. And it's one of the most, common things that we all share as humans is we've all gathered around food and laughed and cried and loved and gone through the hardest times over a meal. In fact, sometimes that's the only thing that we have, is just to make whatever meager ingredients we have and make a meal that makes that moment just a little bit better. And so, yeah, I do think that's really well said. I never thought of it that way, but I know that we feel that it's a responsibility for us to feed others when they can't, and to help out when those times come that, we have a commodity that is like, one of the things that all humans should have, which is access to clean, healthy food. And not everybody does. So we have a big responsibility to steward that as restaurateurs.
Yeah, there's your purpose right there. And that's what keeps you going. And that's what drives you. And fosters the creativity and the care and the love and the intention that you approach your business with. No doubt about it. Talk about one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is this concept of stealth health.
Yeah, that was just, we were fighting. I think from the beginning, when we opened Root Down, we wanted to do it in a way that felt like we were being more conscious about the ingredients we sourced, which then became, I think, a big movement, right? Farm to table. But we wanted to be aware of like making choices that were better for both the earth, but also better for the body. And so we tried, I think, for many years and still do, to try and bring food to that's delicious and rich and sometimes just feels like you're getting spoiled, but not doing it in the ways that I think, I would always joke, it seems like it's always bacon, cream, bread, butter. There's nothing wrong with those things. Those are great ingredients, but it just felt at the time in Denver, they were just being put into everything. And so when we opened Vital Root specifically, which was a restaurant that we were 100% gluten-free, we had the menu available 98% vegan, 99% grain-free. We wanted to have this stealth health. We didn't want to say we're a health food restaurant because in a way we weren't. We weren't trying to be a macrobiotic or a raw restaurant, which are obviously have like great health benefits. We wanted to be able to deliver food to people that felt just as, I don't know, decadent as going out to your favorite restaurant. But at the end of the day, you felt good. You didn't feel this like hour bloat or 4 hour bloat or sleep really crappily or just, feel like, man, I have to sacrifice good food and health, And so we just called it stealth health because we were constantly making decisions, even if the guests didn't care about the food we were making. And we tried to find ingredients and we were using things which, now maybe are a little bit more widespread, but instead of grains, we were using like mung beans because those are like so healthy and, lentils, which people obviously eat all over the world. But instead of rice noodles, which rice does not have a lot of nutritional value. It's obviously a commodity in all over Asia where they make a lot of great products. But in our pad thai, we were using mung bean noodles instead of rice noodles. And so we just made little choices like that. And then, bacon, everybody loves bacon. But we're like, how do we do that as a vegetarian restaurant, which we were at the time? We've now had to, sort of cater our menu a little bit wider to include some meat. But we were making coconut bacon for a while and just basically smoking strips of coconut and trying to make this coconut bacon. And so it felt like we weren't trying to have people never have those textures and flavors that meat and fish and animal products can have because there's so many great products. But we wanted to do it in a way that was vegetable forward and vegetable focused. Yeah, there's just a whole school of people who try and make food that, that's finally come to the forefront. For 50 years, a veggie burger was in the shape of a burger, but it tasted like vegetables. But like, I don't know if people eat a burger to eat the vegetable. They want that delicious, meaty, umami part of a burger. So I love that now there's the Impossible Burger and there's all these other burger companies that have said, we're not going to try and make a vegetable burger. We're going to make it out of vegetable, but we're going to make it taste and look and bleed like a meat burger because that's really what most people want to eat when they eat a burger. So something like that.
I got you. I got you. Well, I want to know what I saw something in there about keto crack. I'm curious what keto crack is. I know what keto is.
Yeah. So keto just being the high fat version of a diet that basically is super low carb. You eat more fats than protein. So it was just something we started to make. I honestly became keto at home during COVID and found myself in a very different place health-wise. As a chef, I love to eat. I could eat really 6,000 calories a day and in one respect be very happy, but there's no way my body can process 6,000 calories a day. So I really started to go towards being full first and satiation, and fats and proteins do that very well. So anyway, during COVID, I was getting more exercise. I was eating better. And I made this thing that just like, I think the recipe was something crack. And I just converted it to like keto crack because it was a high fat version of basically a crunchy, turkey, high fat meal. And that we eventually brought into the restaurant. And yeah, it was just because it was really addictive had all these flavors, had sesame, soy, ginger, garlic, just it had the right balance of flavors that it was really easy to eat, but when you ate it, you felt good. There was like next to zero carbs in it, which is like a really hard feat to do in a restaurant. To have
Mm.
virtually, 5 or 6 grams of net carbs per serving is really difficult to do. So that's just why we named it that. It was just very addictive to eat it and feel good. A lot of us were eating it a lot because it was so filling and so delicious.
That sounds fantastic, man. I love it. That sounds really good. Are you still on the keto diet?
My age has with my doctor, I was until I went to my doctor and I was able to do a scan and find out what my muscle mass was, which is something called a DEXA scan. And when I found out how below par I was, even though I was rowing every day for 45 minutes, I found out that I needed to gain muscle. And being 50 and over, it's all about protein. So I just switched from pretty much keto to like protein. I try and get 150 to 175 grams of protein a day. And that's what my body at this age needs. And it's working for me and I love it. I wouldn't go back to keto anymore because I was shrinking. I just didn't have a muscle mass that I needed at this age to be healthy. So probably TMI, but
No, I'm actually fascinated with this stuff. I mean, do you take creatine?
I was taking it for a while and I dabble in and out of it. My trainer says they think it's a really good thing to take. I'm taking something now that's similar to that I actually like better. And I'm lucky enough, I get to get my scan done every couple months so I can see my muscle mass
Mm.
changing by an actual scan. I don't just guess like, oh, I'm stronger. Like I'll go and get a full body scan and I'll find out how much my muscle to mass ratio is. But I'm taking something called Yoked now that my doctor turned me on to, which he says is just a little bit more effective than he's seen it for over 50 in creatine. But I know creatine's great.
What is it called?
It's called Yoked, actually. Why? It's just an egg yolk dehydrated. And it doesn't taste like egg yolk. It just tastes a little savory, but it's basically bright yellow, and I think it's only egg yolks, and it has something that's similar. Boy, I'll screw up the name. It's not metformin. It's some other thing that helps build muscle mass. And he's like 65, and he's like an ex-Green Beret, and he looks ridiculous, but he's like, this is my supplement. Besides, obviously protein supplements. So I got it and I tried it, and I love it.
Okay, I'll have to check that. I
Yeah,
take, but I'm fascinated with this. I'm 50. I'm always trying to just dial into, what I'm putting in my body. And,
exactly.
you do start to realize, like you mentioned this, like I can tell now if I go out somewhere or if I cook at home, but like if I eat, there's certain things where I know now, like that might taste good, but it's gonna cause me to bloat. I won't sleep as like, and then
Yeah,
it's kind of good and bad. It's like good because you probably are, taking better care of your body, but it's bad because when you're young, you're like, you can get away with anything. And
anything.
you're like, dang it, I can't eat that because I'll feel like crap. And then you're like, what is this? And it's just like this constant battle. It's like, you mean I can't eat freaking pizza now without feeling
Exactly.
like, what the hell? The superpower. It's wasted on youth too because they don't
Yep,
never get it until you get to be our age.
that is so true.
Well, okay, so I have to just changing gears slightly. I saw that you're a deadhead. So,
Yeah.
is that from like back in the day, from childhood? You've just been kind of following them, and have you gone and seen Dead and Company with what's his name? What's the
John Mayer.
John Mayer? Yeah.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to really get turned on when I was 13. I can't believe I have what's going on a 40-year relationship with that music and that band. I never thought it could last that long. And I've definitely gone through ebbs and flows. I've definitely, for a while, I quit college because at the time Jerry Garcia got out of his diabetic coma and they put on 3 shows in San Francisco. I immediately quit school and flew out there and threw it away because I was like, it's way more important for me to catch these shows because I don't know how much longer they're going to be around. They ended up being around another like 9 years. But I quit college, went to see them, and luckily seen close to about 50 shows with the Garcia era band. But the music to me, the philosophy behind the music, it's really everything. It's not just the music. It's just the way their product, the businessmen they are, the culture they have, the way they take care of their roadies, they're, the coffee guy. Like they just have like a really great culture, which is the sum is greater than its parts. And I've always approached restaurants, especially when I moved to Denver. Every one of my restaurants is actually named after a Steely Dan lyric, not the actual restaurant itself, but the LLC. And just the philosophy of all the restaurants is very much like improvisational in a lot of ways. And so I've probably grown out of that, as all improvisers do. Eventually, you can only do that so long at such a level. But I always thought their music really informed me sometimes on like how I wanted to be as an owner, how I wanted to speak to the staff of the things we talked about, probably deeper than most staff want to hear. But but the ones who were interested, I think it really connected with people. So I don't know. I just always carried around in the back of my mind without thinking about it. It's just informed the way I like see a lot of things, which I think a lot of deadheads, that's how they're affected by it. It's not just they love the jams, they love the songs. Like I could go a year, and I've been sometimes like last time I went like 4 years without listening to a note of their music. I had no interest, but I still really love what they stood for and how they did things. And I never lost that appreciation. But to answer your question, I've seen Dead and Company probably like a dozen times, and they're a lot of fun. Mayor really surprised me. I went on a like, yeah, I'll check it out, but it's not going to be the same. And it wasn't the same, but it was something. It was just a new iteration that I thought was the best iteration of their music in a long time. I know a lot of people love or hate him, but I think he's great in that band.
I've heard good things. I haven't been, but I've heard good things. It's just funny. I saw that my son, I have 3 kids. My 18-year-old son, he's a senior, and he's been going through all these different like, genres of music, and he just like 2 weeks ago, we were driving somewhere. He's playing Grateful Dead. I'm like, let's go listen to Grateful Dead. He's like, oh, I heard and I love it. Last night he was getting his hair cut, and we have this lady that comes over here and does all the boys' hair, and he had Althea playing, and
nice.
I was like, man, I'm going to be interviewing this guy tomorrow. He likes to do.
That's great.
I'm kind of a widespread fan, or I was for a long time, and never really got into fish, but I've always been a good, I kind of dig some widespread panic. So
yeah, I'm secretly like on the anti-fish. What is it called? Train. Yeah. But I always make fun of people like, just like, yeah, how do you do that? Go to a fish. But I know it's the same. Like many people say that about, why would you go to a Dead show? It's like so many, and it is hit or miss, and it is long. It's all the things they say, but if it connects to you, who cares? So I know it's the same with fish. It connects with people and it's great, but I don't get it at all.
No, I don't get fish. We were just on a guys' weekend about a month ago, and some college buddies, and we have a buddy who's in the fish, and we were just railing like, dude, what the hell? Is that even music? But
my God.
So, but the philosophy thing here, this is an interesting part of this. I was wondering if you might tie that in, and you did. And I wonder, I'll couch this with, I share many of the same philosophies, and I look a lot of times to business leaders in different domains to draw inspiration. One of those being Yvonne Chouinard at Patagonia. Do you have other people that you read or listen to podcasts or follow that are that outside of the hospitality world?
I shamefully don't. I tried to dip my feet in some of the books, but I always found that, I probably didn't have the patience to get, like, there was definitely nuggets. I'll sometimes just go to a page and read, and I'll find something, but it's just like, I'm an avid reader. Like I read about 8, 9 books at a time, and it's all nonfiction. And somehow I feel like when I read about the things I'm reading about nonfiction, which is mostly like any old, white guy, World War II or survival books or ships, like Arctic. I'm fascinated by Arctic and Antarctic from the early, 1900s and 1800s. I feel like I see a lot of the things that I'm seeing in, Brené Brown's book or Sinek, like the things they're talking about, I'm sort of reading about it in a different way, in the way the leaders in these stories do things. But it's, to me, much more engaging to read about, especially with, and not to say that those people aren't good writers, but some of the writers, and another one who's really great, he just came out with a Captain Cook book. Oh my God, I can't believe I can't remember his name. But the writing in them, they're just so great. They're great storytellers. So I get lost in the storytelling. It's magical. But I feel like I put leadership. I see the lens a lot of time through those stories about, whether it's the people on the ship being the staff and the captain being a leader and then the first mate being a GM. Like, it sounds a little dorky, but I definitely it informs me in a way that I feel like I get a lot out of that I don't go to the books or the podcast much. I just get there a different way, so to speak.
I freaking love that, dude. I think it's not, well, maybe it is dorky. Maybe you and I are dorks. So I'll say that. So check this out. I like to read a lot as well. I actually read a lot of fiction. Um, but I learn a lot because a lot of times an author will be real honest through their fiction characters, and you learn a lot from that. But I really like good, whether it's movies or TV, I like very well written things that are displayed on a screen, on film. And I'm a big fan of the Godfather movies, right? So there's a show called The Offer. And The Offer is it's like 10 episodes, one season. That was it, the whole story. But it was a story of the making of The Godfather.
Oh, wow.
Right. And Al Ruddy, who's the dude who produced that movie,
Yep.
the stuff that guy had to overcome. I mean, I had heard that there was I've always heard oh my gosh, it almost never got made. Blah,
Yep.
blah, like Bob Evans, the head of Paramount, hated Pacino, this,
Yep.
the other, blah, blah, blah. The mob was involved. Well, so Bob Evans, actually, who was the head of Paramount, he brings in Al Ruddy to make this film, and Al Ruddy's pretty junior. He had done a couple of TV shows. He had done one show, really. And he's go figure this out. And Al Ruddy is The Offer is his story about making that movie. But there's so many times, and I relate this actually it's germane to our conversation, Justin, because there were so many times where he gets hit with some overwhelming circumstance where it's this thing's not we're not
right.
And he would always go, he would just go, I'll figure it out.
Right.
Ford Coppola would come to him and go, if we can't film instantly, I quit. And I don't care if we don't have the budget. You find the money or I'm out of here. And Al Ruddy be and then he gets the money and then the mob comes to him. They're like, dude, we want that. It's but he would always he would just patiently and calmly and creatively figure it out. And I think about, I've literally watched this show 3 times. And
I can't wait to watch it.
You'll love it, dude, because you get inspiration from that, I think, and so do I, because I look at that and I think about myself in certain situations in business or whatever where I'm okay, you're at some inflection point and you can either go, this is going to tear me down, or I'm going to use it to make myself better, right?
Exactly.
Individuals, and then we can do that as leaders, within our business. And I think there's a lot you can, whether it's through nonfiction and autobiographies or biographies, or whether it's through stories. It's what you said, it's the story, but we love stories. We want to hear stories, and stories that are told well, that have a character. The definition of a story is a character who wants something and has to overcome an obstacle to get it, right? That is a story, right?
Yep.
And so that's what we're kind of living out. You own a business and you're running a team and you're writing this story, and you're the character in the middle of this story, and you think all is going well, and then COVID or the economy, but you're is it going to break me or is it going to make me better? And sometimes we need that external stimulus to help us re-engage, at least me, to expect you to re-engage myself into, you're not the only one dealing with hard stuff right now. And watch how this character overcomes something and use that as a tool. And maybe I just dorked out for 3 minutes worse than anybody's dorked out on a podcast.
No.
That's how I roll. Straight up.
That's great. I cannot wait to watch it. And I have no doubt I will be putting myself and thinking about things, because restaurants just shouldn't be possible sometimes. Just opening a restaurant, the no's you get, the obstacles. And it's usually not weekly, it's daily. It's sometimes by the minute. And it's restaurants have an incredible way. And so much, as you already said, is how are you going to approach this challenge? And I think people who do not see opportunity in challenges and see challenges as a negative thing probably are not going to make it and not going to be successful, at least in the restaurant business. So much of it is, what is your intent, and how do you roll? And I think the positivity, I'm a big believer in just sort of being positive in the face of extreme conditions. And there's a lot of negativity in the restaurant business. And I get it. There's a lot of like places that don't foster that, in fact, foster negativity. They foster throwing each other under the bus, backstabbing, drama. And so we get people coming to the restaurant that are already like been 10 years in that. And it's like, I don't begrudge them for having that mindset. That's how they were fostered in the restaurant. But it's a real, we really try to like change people's perspective to just be open to the opportunity. Let's see where it goes from here. Let's be open to a set of, conditions and guardrails. Let's agree to them. And, one of my favorite quotes that we use is, and I was lucky, is the quote I found on my first staff meeting on day one, 15 years ago. And it was, I'd rather be saved by criticism than ruined by praise. Because I know it's really easy to get validated by praise. If you show somebody your shitty art, who's going to say that really sucks? But if somebody's like, yeah, that's not great, or here's some things you could do better, then maybe you could take that to heart if you don't take it personal. So I think it's really easy to get that positive validation, which is obviously we all need as humans. But I really want to get to the place where we can grow from really being able to take criticism as a fuel, as a way to get better.
Oh, amen, dude. I love it. You know what? I tell you what, as somebody who likes nonfiction, there's a book I would recommend. I wonder if I have it sitting there somewhere in this house. It's called Deep Survival. And I
had to look it up.
Deep Survival is, it's this guy, he goes and studies people that have survived.
I have this book.
You do have the book.
I haven't read it yet. I purchased it in 2020 on October 8th, and it's sitting on, I have piles of book to read. And so I have it, and I'm going to probably move it up to the top of the pile now.
Pull it up there, because I won't I'm not going to ruin it for you, because it's probably even on the back of the book. It's just the stories that are so compelling. But what they really realize in this is, like, when you have these, like, let's say you're fishing with your friends and your boat capsizes.
Right.
You have some event. COVID would be a perfect, what you might call a black swan event, like some big event that has a huge negative impact that is not planned for. You have two things you can do at this point. You can accept that, like give it up and accept it and go, okay, I can't change what happened, but I can decide how I'm going to handle this situation.
Yep.
Or you can let it break you. And so, like, the people that, wind up surviving these types of things are not the people that are like, how could this have happened? We just crossed the boat and we were fishing and the weather was supposed to be great and a rogue wave came and now we might, like, if that's not me, that can't, you will never survive. But if you go, okay, let's turn this into an adventure. In other words, like, I get back to, like, we can write this story from here.
Right. There you go.
That's a really important mindset. It took me a long time, like, to realize as a young man, I didn't have that maturity, and I'm still working on it. But I do think it's an important part, whether it's raising a family or running a business or whatever. That mentality is, I think, really important.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it, because that's so many of the books I like to read is just people put in extreme survival situations, or even just to their extreme, not always survival, just when they're pushed to the edge of what they think they're able to accomplish or do. So that's the part of nonfiction why World War II is rife with that, as well as Arctic and ship. And I'm reading now one called Alone, which the guy is exactly what you said. He's on a boat with his buddies. There are 50-year-old successful business people. They go to this place in Indonesia, and he falls off the boat in the middle of one of the worst, sort of oceans. And yeah, he I don't know where it goes, but I know he has to do all those things. And he's just starting to, like, he laments at first, but then he quickly changes. And it's funny. He says in the book that, okay, I'm going to assign every part of my body. So my mouth is the boardroom. My eyes are the management team. He just does this weird exercise of making parts of his body his leadership team. And I thought that was fascinating. Wow. Yeah. We were bidding on a restaurant together in a collaboration for DIA, which I think he since got one. I have a restaurant at DIA and I think he got one. So yeah, Juan is definitely, like, front and center in the restaurant community here and very vocal. And I know he during COVID, he was a great resource, and yeah, he's another one that's in that Dave Query level restaurateur for being a local Denver, person. Yeah, we really do. Yeah, thank you for having me. It was definitely a pleasure. If you have my email or number, or MC can give it to you, but yeah, by all means, hit me up. Would love to connect.
Oh,
Okay, that would be
all right.
great. All right,
Have a
thanks,
good
Will. I
day. All right.
appreciate it. Okay,
See you.
bye-bye.